But as far as Nike is concerned,
Well, as
I
far as
think
Nike
it's
is
an
concerned,
interesting parallel because Apple was a company that thrived because of its culture and also because of its brand marketing. And there's a lot of overlap between the way Nike saw itself for the last 30 years and why it succeeded. And I have some thoughts on the LinkedIn post. And I need your help choosing a take because, and for anybody who didn't read it, we'll put it in the show notes. The author basically cites the 2020 takeover by new CEO John Donahoe as the beginning of the end. And he mentions three big decisions that Nike got wrong, which is one, eliminating distinct expertise silos throughout the company, like brand, product, development, sales. Two, ending a bunch of relationships with retailers around the world and trying to become a direct to consumer leader, just funneling everything to Nike.com as opposed to the wholesale business. And then three, upending its marketing approach and shifting from investments in brand advertising to targeted digital advertising. And to give people a sense of how this was received online this week, a tweet from Gregory Kennedy on Twitter who writes, even if you're not in marketing, you should read this post from the former CMO of Nike. It details Nike's transition from a brand-driven demand creation engine to a data-driven performance direct-to-consumer model that relied primarily on sales on Nike.com. The results, after the release of Nike's Q2 2024 financial results, they lost $25 billion in market cap in a day, and shares hit their lowest point since 2018. It's a decline of 32% since the beginning of 2024. Ouch. And Ben, in response to this LinkedIn post, I did come up with two takes. And the first take is what I want to believe, which is to take the post at face value and say this is another Boeing and McDonnell Douglas situation where the business school bean counters have come in and they don't understand the soul of the company and they have optimized everything away that made Nike special in the first place. And on this point, it's funny that Karthik mentions Netflix because I was thinking about Netflix as I read through everything, not because Netflix doesn't know how to make hit shows, but our conversation last week where there seems to be recognition at Netflix that they don't have the muscle groups developed to spend the next 10 years trying to fight YouTube for ad money. And so instead, they're leaning into being the best premium service in video and just doubling down on their strengths. And I think in Nike's case, there's a version of the story where instead of willingly putting their heads into the e-commerce wood chipper, they recognize that, direct to consumer traffic acquisition is incredibly difficult and it's a hard business that they know nothing about. And the best chance for them to continue to succeed and distinguish themselves is with brand advertising and expertise and innovation. And they didn't go that direction and they're suffering for it. They wanted to measure everything. The bean counters took over. That's what I would like to believe. How much of that story do you buy?
I buy a lot of it. And I think the problem is not necessarily John Donahoe. The problem is the board. So if you you look at what was, by the way, ironically enough, includes Tim Cook. You look at John Donahoe's background. He used to be the CEO of eBay, and then he was the CEO of ServiceNow, like an enterprise sort of SaaS company.
Yeah.
So it sounds to me he's delivering what the board wanted, which is a sort of data-driven sort of approach that works for an auction marketplace, works for a business SaaS marketplace. Like this issue that is being talked about sort of goes to the top. And this is sort of the pushback. I know like our good friend Eric Seufert sort of like pushed back on this LinkedIn post a little bit, saying, look, like it's kind of over indexing on a couple of points. DTC is not necessarily bad. There's other issues with Nike. There's China issues, sort of XYZ. And I want to give credence to that. Again, that whole first part of the podcast is me laying out why this is like just like chum for me. Like, it's like I want to believe it very much. But
right. I'm worried about my own confirmation bias.
That's why I go back to John Donahoe's background and what this says about the board and what they thought about these possibilities. It's hard to draw any other conclusion than that this LinkedIn post has it correct. Like, that's the sort of CEO you hire if you want to pursue the strategy they're accusing them of doing. And what's funny about this, the analogy to streaming I would draw is not Netflix, but all the other streamers who thought, oh, the selling to consumer part's easy, as we have all the content and the whole, like, and actually they've never sold to customers. They've been selling to Comcast and they've been selling to Charter and then like these other distributors that were actually dealing with customers on their behalf. They didn't have to think about things like customer acquisition and churn because everyone just got cable, and no one ever cut it, right? And it was tied to your internet. Of course, you weren't going to sort of get rid of it. And they realized that when you get into this new world where you have to acquire customers yourself, where the expectation is you can cancel on a monthly basis at any time you want, so you have to work to sort of retain customers. You have to do customer support. You have to actually build out your tech stack in a way that is sort of functional. They bit off far more than they realized that they could chew, and they gave up a model that was actually phenomenal in every single respect. In this case, DTC, what is it dependent on? Why is it actually really hard? It's like, wow, we don't need to have stores. Isn't that great? Well,
it's expensive to acquire traffic.
You have to acquire customers, right?
Yeah.
So what happens? Facebook's going to take all your money. Google's going to take all your money. But guess what? Facebook, the reason why Facebook, like everyone knows, you put money blindly into Facebook, say, I want to generate X number of customers, and Facebook delivers the customers. And they're probably maneuvering it. They're showing ads to people that don't want it and people that do want it, XYZ. But guess what? Facebook delivers you customers that you would have never got otherwise. And that's why you pay for it. So like at the end of the day, because they get the job done in a remarkably effective way. And it's so funny. You talk to people who are trying to do these like these little apps or whatever it might be, and they're like, oh, how do you get customers? And they're like this is literally what Facebook does for you. You have no capacity on your own to acquire customers meaningfully. You go to Facebook, say, look, my lifetime value of my customers is $15. I will pay $10 per customer to get it. And Facebook will take all 10 of those dollars, but you have $5 of profit or a revenue in excess of your advertising
otherwise.
You would have never had otherwise. And it feels kind of nasty because Facebook is just squeezing you for every last dime. That's where their margins come from. And yet, you're totally dependent on them. Well, guess what company does not need to build customer awareness?
Nike
is this whole thing about we're going to drive it to Nike.com and what? Save margin. Okay, fine. Because you're going to pay retailers the margin, whatever it is. All you're doing is giving that margin to Facebook instead, which, by the way, is massively more efficient and effective at taking your margin than a retailer who's still operating in the analog world, depending on people walking in, is ever going to be. It's a classic case of looking at the new guys, looking at all these startups, looking at like, oh, look, they can go sort of direct. We're at a cost disadvantage, wherever it might be. It's like it's like the streamers looking at Netflix and being jealous, not realizing they had the better deal.